Good morning. The architecture of religious precincts play a crucial role in shaping up spiritual experiences and fostering a sense of sacredness and reflecting cultural and religious identity. Design elements, form, and proportions often symbolize religious principles and create environments conducive to worship, meditation, and community gatherings. Here, so we are very, very proud to present one of such projects where we were lucky to work on a religious precinct, which is Kottur Shiva Temple, tourism and pilgrim amenities. Kottur Shiva Temple is known as Southern Varanasi. It is one of the most famous temple in the North Malabar. It is related to the story of Dakshayaga, and there are two temples. One is Akkare Kottur and Ikkare Kottur. And Akkare Kottur is only active during Vaishaga Mahotsavam, while this temple is having daily puja. And though there is endless stories related to this temple, and only during a small period that is being visible for the visitors, and that is during the Vaishaga Mahotsavam, which is like 30 days. And during those 30 days, lakhs and lakhs of people do come to the temple. Otherwise, it's a very silent temple, but with a very rich history. So how do we make sure that history is known to people who are coming to the temple on other days and not during Vaishaga Mahotsava also? We got an opportunity like this to work on a heritage precincts of Northern Malabar, which is called Talasheri Heritage Project. And this project, we worked identifying destinations across Northern Malabar, and we identified 61 destinations across 14 municipalities and 9 constituencies, and made a master plan out of that, connecting into various circuits. And finally, we ended up with 4 circuits. One is the cultural circuits, which is having 14 destinations. One is the Harbour Town circuits, folklore circuit, which is having 6 destinations. And then Harbour circuit, which is having 17 destinations. And the Parshi circuit, which was having 19 destinations. And Kottur Temple is one among the 19 destinations of this particular circuit. Yeah. And Kottur is on the way to the hillocks of Wayanad. And it is in between a lot of forested area. And there are reserve forests in and around the temple as well. So this is the 15-acre land that temple owns, the Ikkare Kottur temple owns, and you can also see the Akkare Kottur, which is only open during the festivals. Yeah. So this, when we went there 3 years before, this was how the temple precinct was, and they had vandalized the pristine precinct with the carve and everything, with concrete buildings like this as offices. And post-independence, whatever building that we are considered in religious places has been completely out of language on what it means to be the architecture of sacredness. This were the puja counter and ticket counters. There were this one heritage building which is the Bhojanalaya of that place. And there was a cow shed because the part of that was part of the culture of the temple. Yeah, and there was one heritage cow shed which was there, which was not used as well. And we did an extensive documentation of the temple and of all the heritage buildings that was nearby. And we found out there were very starking proportions and elements that was present very strongly in the language of making the temple, and which was not followed for last 50 or 100 years. And thus, we also talked and discussed the idea about how this heritage can be brought back with many stakeholders, with historians, with people, with artisans, and also with the government officials, and made a complete master plan report on what is the role of each destination in the circuit, and how this destination can become a cultural place. And we came up with master plans, conceptual master plans for each destination, where Kottur had its own role to play, and there were many aspects in the temple to be addressed, while all those will be addressed in different phases. And we also made sure that it is not a repetition of language across the destinations. So we could touch a lot of religious precinct in this in the process, and you can see how each detail is different. What we did in Kottayur follows what was there in Kottayur. What we did in Todikalam follows what was there in Todikalam. What we did in Mridanga Saleshwari follows what there is in Mridanga Saleshwari. There are a lot of this proportion and material study as part of this project. And in Kottayur, we had this big carver which was completely untouched, pristine carver right next to the temple. And we had the temple with a long devotee passage, path leading to the temple which we kept untouched. And we had a welcome zone which were where the vehicles and the buses were parked. And we created a transitional culture zone. Whatever you see otherwise are all concrete buildings created by different Devasam management during different parts of time. So we wanted to create a transitional cultural zone to bring back the importance of temple as a cultural place. And also, we created tourism experience zone to talk about the rich history and story of the temple, and somewhat detached from the main devotee pathways and placed in between the trees. And we created small storytelling places and OIT with a small library which will house the books and heritage. So this path is kept as it is without being touched during our project, while we created an alternate path for the pilgrims and tourists to experience the temple and the story. So we had the weekend markets, also developed at the festival market during the Vaishaka Mahotsavam, right at the welcome zone. We had the training and performance center where they can perform the temple arts and performance arts. We had a small kiosk which would sell or activate during the events. And we had a gallery and heritage knowledge center which would have this open-air theatre and cowshed. So this is the weekend market. So you know how the proportions can come back, how we have adapted the temple proportions as the part of the whole project. And this is the gallery and heritage center, and it seamlessly integrated to the landscape with the OIT. And we had a library and also a gallery to talk about the history of the place, which is yet to be curated. Yeah, and we also made the cowshed, which followed the language of what it was there before, and we could recreate it. So this is how the festival happens there before, and now all these buildings add to that weekend market, and suddenly the whole sacredness have started to come back in terms of the proportions of the space and the language of the space. Yeah. So this gets activated during the festivals. This is the training and performance center, which is seamlessly integrated to the landscape and the terrain. Yeah, this is the inside part of the training and performance center. And this is the small OIT, which is, you can see the buildings which was created before, right next to it, and the building that we created, taking the proportions of the place. And this is the gallery and the knowledge center. Yeah, a lot of details have gone into, even in the joinery and everything else. The temples serve as a vital cultural space, embodying rich heritage and traditions. They act as repositories of art, architecture, culture, religious practices, reflecting the historical evolution of societies. These values are to be protected and conveyed across generations. Hence, such interventions becomes very important in upholding our heritage. The role of an architect or architecture is beyond just form, space, and order. It's about regaining the spirituality of the space. We become a reason, we become a catalyst to preserve the cultural identity of the community. The space will act as a hub for cultural events, festivals, interactions, and knowledge transactions, fostering a sense of togetherness and enhancing the sense of sacredness. Thank you.
Now let's move on to the discussion session.
Hi. See, the only reason I'm asking the question is that these two have designated me as the spokesperson, okay? Okay. No, in the last image, there were these steps, right? So there were steps which were into the landscape, and then there were 3 levels in the veranda, even the central space had a different level, right? So can you explain to me what made you do those levels?
Yeah,
I mean, outside I understand and the one plinth I understand. But even within the structure, there are variations in the
No, no,
levels.
the entire structure was not in one single contour. So the place was in a sloping contour, so that we didn't want to disturb the terrain of the place or even want to cut one tree. So the whole location was, kept without cutting or disturbing the number of trees or disturbing the landscape and the levels there. So none of the building actually has a plinth level which is continuous across its boundary. So we were managing the levels according to the site. Inside, yes, inside, because that proportion is like that. Now, if you want to get the roof proportion, which was part of the heritage, it creates a 3-level plinth, and the roof extends to the last plinth, and that is how you get that human proportions, and suddenly you bend inside and then go inside, and that feeling of proportions come from there.
I have a question. Congratulations, very beautiful building, a set of interventions you've made. It's not one building. I have a question which is not related to the built form as such, but much more from a philosophical as well as a more sort of a political question. There's been a substantial amount of discussion in the country over the last 10 years about the meaning of the word secularism, right? Secular. And there's been a substantial amount of debate more recently about the fact that the word secular was introduced in the Constitution of India much later, not when the original framers of the Constitution actually authored and wrote the Constitution. So I want to understand a little bit more about your interpretation of secular, or the word secular, in your design and thinking processes.
Thank you, madam, for that question. This is one point that we had discussed throughout in the process of preparing that master plan. We had to negotiate with each and single devasam that we work with to make sure our interventions are just out of that point, threshold, where there is a religious difference to enter into the temple, or. So we made sure if we are intervening in the precinct, it has to be a secular space, it has to be allowed for any religion, it has to be allowed for tourists from across the world, and it will talk about our culture to them. So we made sure wherever we intervened, it's going to be a secular space, and we are glad that Devasams and the people associated with it were open enough to allow such spaces. And now the whole set of temples have become a cultural hub for the whole region. Yeah, and I think that would go a long way in protecting the secularism of the region as well.
I would then urge you to add the word secular in your imagination of sacred.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.